My name is Ulrike Bender, and I'm a community docent at the Agnes Etherington Art Centre. I also write the blog for the Kingston School of Art Gallery, the one we're standing in front of right now, and I do a bit of photography for them. So I'm going to put on my docent hat, and I'm going to give you a little tour of the exhibition that's currently inside. It's called, quite simply, Kingston Printmakers. Follow me. So here we are in the gallery, surrounded by the work of 9 printmakers. And what's interesting about this exhibition, interesting and exciting as well, is the fact not only of the images themselves, but of the techniques that the various printmakers have used. So I'm going to start by talking about this piece. It's a relief print by Isabella Cresswell-Jones. Isabella is someone who has recently joined the Friday print studio here at the Kingston School of Art, and she's been spending her time doing lino cuts. Now, a lino cut involves taking away certain sections of a plate in order to create an image. And so what we see here is, in this particular piece, which is called Three Crows, you'll see that the black area is the part that has been left behind, and the whiter area with the lines is the part that has been cut away. And so the relief section, the part that's high up, is what's inked. A piece of paper is laid on it, it's put through the press, and then the paper is peeled off. So what I like about this piece is, first of all, the composition. You can see that there are 3 crows that have been slightly overlapped to give a sense of depth, and we also have different sizes of crows. Secondly, I like the way Isabella has used the white space in the background. You can see the gouges that she's made with her tool, and these have created concentric lines that focus directly on the crows. And the middle crow, of course, is the one that is the most dominant, with this interesting texture that has likely also been put right on the plate. So this is an interesting black and white piece that has gone through the press one time to create the black. So now we're looking at another relief print. This is by Barb Carr, and this is a slightly different technique from the one we just saw. And you can see that it's in full color, and it takes up the entire frame. So the color has been overlapped. It's a sort of a rich amalgam. And the kind of printmaking that this is reduction printmaking. Colloquially, this is known as suicide printmaking, because what happens is the artist uses a lino print and cuts away each of the sections as the colors are placed, until finally you're left with the last color. In other words, you've reduced the entire plate. So you can see that this starts with white. The lines that are white are the first things that were reduced. And then after that comes yellow. And the yellow, by the way, went across the entire plate. And then when it came time to do the green, the yellow section was removed. Green was done throughout the entire plate. And then finally, the black. Barb did this piece after a sketch that she did when she was visiting Gloucester, Massachusetts. And we can recognize that it's a boat in a harbor, but in fact, there's an abstract element to this piece. First of all, the colors are not used necessarily in a realistic way. And secondly, there's a sense of decorativeness. Not only that, the boat has been positioned in a diagonal fashion, and there are lines that reinforce the diagonality to give it a sense of dynamism, a sense of movement. And she's also repeated, as you can see, the round areas here and added a little bit of hand painting in these 2 areas. So all in all, it's a lovely composition. Now we're looking at 2 relief prints done by Wendy Kane, part of her smoky still life series. She calls them mono-reliefs because they're the kind of thing that really can't be reproduced. So we've been looking at lino cuts. Lino cuts can have several passes through the press, and the plate can be used over and over again. In this instance, there's an element of chance to the result of these prints. Now, how does this happen? Well, if we look at the technique, I can explain it to you. So Wendy is a paper maker, a paper artist. And what she does is she takes her freshly made paper, which is still wet, and lays it on a vacuum table. Then she uses Japanese paper that she has cut into shapes and inked. These are then placed on the handmade paper. And then when the vacuum is closed, there's a kind of leaching that takes place. And so the wet paper below sucks up the ink from the shapes that have been placed on the paper to create these rather hazy outlines. Hazy or smoky, thus the name of this particular series. And not only that, you also get these lovely textures. And again, these are things that aren't necessarily predictable. You'll notice that the negative space on this particular image is probably more as interesting as the positive shapes themselves. Okay, the next technique we're looking at is one called dry point. So this particular image was made by Hannah Roth. And the way she created it is that she used a very sharp tool to incise a plate. Now, traditionally, the plate would be copper, but plexiglass can be used as well. And once the plate is incised and lines are created, then ink is put on the plate. The plate is then wiped clean, and what's left is the ink that is caught in the lines. And that's the thing that gives you the image. So this particular piece, which is called Plum Beetle, is a good example of the very delicate kind of work that can be done with this particular technique. And so because we've created a plate that can be used many times, Hannah has in fact done a second print, and now we have a green beetle. This piece is called Chicken Feed. It's by Kim Fenlan Spazuk. And the technique that she has used is also dry point, but it's different in the sense that she has added color mechanically. So dry point is a technique that involves, as I mentioned earlier, wiping off the plate. And she mentioned to me that this is probably one of the hardest things for someone who's learning dry point, because you're not sure just how much to wipe away. If you don't wipe away enough, then the piece is too dark. If you wipe away too much, then you don't have any tone in the background. You may or may not want the tone. In this case, Kim wiped away everything, and so she had a very clean background. But the subject is a kind of a strutting rooster. And in order to make this rooster's personality really come to the fore, and so she decided that she would add watercolor. The red really gives him a little bit more presence. In fact, I think he's more interested in himself than he is in the chicken feed. Now we're looking at a piece by Rebecca Cowan. Rebecca is a veteran dry point user, and so this particular piece is in fact a series of 4 interiors of bungalows on a suburban street called Balsam Crescent. So what she's done is she's created an interior that shows us a little bit of what goes on in suburban life. Now, we have an idea of what suburbia is all about. We've got the nuclear family, we've got parents, we've got children. And in fact, she grew up in a bungalow herself, so she knows what goes on here. In this first interior, we get a sense of the couple, the parents, and the kids kind of looking on. It's a tender moment between husband and wife. In the second series, we have another very domestic kind of scene. We have mom in the kitchen. We have dad relaxing on his easy chair. Maybe he's just come back from work. His collar is open. He's wearing a tie. There's a dog. And then the kids are, well, seemingly left on their own. In the next one, she's actually taken a theme from contemporary issues, namely the Me Too movement, and she's considered what this might look like in a 50s context. So here we have a young woman, well, probably a teenager, putting on lipstick. And then we have the mother who's looking on maybe a little bit, not quite sure. The dad, we're not really sure what's happening with him either. So there's this kind of tension. And when we think about sexual harassment, there's the potential, there's the unknown, and then there's the concern on the part of the mother. And here's this incredibly wonderful hi-fi set that is typical 50s. In the last series, we have the kids, and what are they doing? They're playing cowboys and Indians. And we have the grandmother with her little cane. So we've got a number of vignettes that we might see in a suburban setting. And by the way, Rebecca has printed not only these interiors, but she's also done all of the wallpaper. And of course, she's created what are little books. Each of these are made up of double accordion folds. And when these are put together, we have a little house. So now we're looking at a monotype by Margaret Bigno. Margaret is the coordinator of the Friday Printmaker Studio, and this is a technique that she often uses. Monotype is a technique in which it's not easy to replicate the same thing, so it's a unique image. And so what she has done here is she has inked a piece of plexiglass, either with a roller or with some other tool. Could be a piece of paper toweling or even a hand. In this case, it's a very smooth background, so I think maybe she rolled it very carefully. And then she created these lines. So it's possible to take the print simply after adding color, but you can also manipulate the surface. And here what she's probably done is swiped, and then she's also scratched, and she's also, I think, added a little bit of extra bits of ink along these areas here. And she's created birch trees, which is in fact the title of this piece. Now, if that was her intention, I'm not sure. It could be that sometimes as you're working with a monotype, you start with a mark, and then as you go along, it evolves into your subject matter. Birch trees. We just looked at a print in which there was very definite verticality. In fact, here's another piece that has the same kind of feeling about it. This is something called Orchid in Bloom by Jane Hamilton Kahn. And it's a mixed media, but in fact, it's a combination of a monotype. So you can see that the background has been rolled in, and she's created these crossing lines. And then she's added a piece of material in this very sort of decorative fashion with gold, and it has a vaguely African feeling to it. And then she's done some hand painting. So in this particular piece, the focus, of course, is the orchids, where we have the highest contrast. But overall, it's a really lovely composition in its verticality and its horizontal aspect, and also in the texture that we see in this particular piece. Now, it was a planned piece. There's no question about that. And not so surprising because, in fact, Jane was in a previous career a graphic artist. Here we have a print by Ian Kennedy. It looks a little bit like a watercolor, and that's not surprising because the technique that he used is one in which he took a piece of plexiglass and painted in watercolor on the plexiglass, let it dry, and then took a piece of wet paper that he then placed on it, and as it went through the press, it picked up the color from the watercolor. So it looks like a watercolor, but in fact, it has all kinds of interesting marks on it that are totally unpredictable. This is another situation where likely you cannot reproduce this particular print. And it's a print that has a lot of, again, interesting textures and feeling of water. All of the prints in his series use the theme of water in some way. This particular one is called Baywatch. Now, Baywatch is the name of a TV program that was on in perhaps the 80s. I can't really remember. And it was all about really buff-looking men and women who were lifeguards on a beach. So he's taken that idea and he's added a little humorous twist here by showing us a person who has the big muscles, a female person, I would say. So we're focusing on her arms rather than the breasts, which is, of course, what you would see in the Baywatch program. And we think it is a woman because there is a red lipstick. But, you know, this could also refer to the fact that there's a kind of an androgynous aspect to the image. And today, we might call this person they. So that takes us to the end of our little tour. If you'd like to see more images, you can have a look at the Kingston School of Art website. And you can also check out my blog if you click on the window art gallery on the site.